So round 2, Chicago Open. I'm paired against FIDE master Jason Wang, who is one of these, underrated juniors. And yeah, he is mainly a d4 player, and seems like he stuck to his normal repertoire. I think I saw some games where he went for the h3 King's Indian, and he does so here. Here I play one of the main lines with e5, d5, knight h5, playing a quick f5, as well as maybe planting the knight on f4. So white plays g3, and now knight a6. So this is not the only move in the position. f5 I think is super popular, a5 as well. With this one, I'm just trying to bring the knight to c5 quickly, play f5, and yeah, create some complications in the opening. So bishop e3 was played, f5, takes, and yeah, now white has like a lot of moves here, like knight g5 and queen d2 and queen c2 and so on. He goes for knight h4, which is definitely one of the thematic moves for white in this position. Otherwise, black is threatening to push f4. So knight h4, the queen is hitting the knight, and black is forced to defend this one. So knight f6. And now he played bishop e2. And I think I was still in my book here, and I fairly quickly just played king h8. I think there's lots of moves black can play, like f4 is already possible, and so on. But king h8, I like this move. You know, it's just kind of a natural improving move, getting the king off of the g file, and yeah, preparing to play f4 or e4, something under better circumstances. So queen c2, and I think this move is a mistake because it allows black to play knight b4 and get a tempo on the queen. Now this normally is not so great on its own, like queen b3, like what's the big deal? But here black can follow up with f4 and actually create a lot of tactics and really open up some lines against white's king. Is the rook going to g8? No, usually not actually. The main point of king h8 is really just to get off of the g file, so that when I play f4, for example, and white takes, my king is not kind of a sitting duck. So mainly a prophylactic move. So this one's a pretty thematic pawn sacrifice, and I think it works well here. If white takes the knight, then we take on e3, and black is down a pawn, but white has lost the dark squared bishop here, so I think black just gets plenty of compensation right off the bat. I think lots of moves are possible here. Bishop h6, c6, a5, and white is, yeah, I think not really happy without the dark squared bishop. I could have also played f4 earlier. Maybe this is even stronger, not giving white this opportunity. But anyway, knight b4, f4. Now if white takes twice here, the point is that a lot of these pieces end up hanging. So I think knight e4 was my prep and is quite a strong move, hanging another piece. But after knight takes e4, queen takes h4, for example, white is, yeah, just has a lot of pieces hanging in the position. Bishop, knight, this rook is hanging. And yeah, I think concretely black is just doing very, very well here. Bishop is opened up, and yeah, white's king just never really going to be safe. And if white goes bishop d4, which looks kind of more logical to oppose the bishop, then black has this nice idea with c5, using the knight on b4. So bishop is kind of stuck, knight is defended, and after it takes, black can take with the knight, hit the bishop again, and the position is just like completely opening up, but black's king I would say is a lot safer, and yeah, it's hard for white to keep the dark square bishop here. In fact, black is just taking this bishop next, and the unopposed dark square bishop is going to be super, super strong. So yeah, I played f4. White played bishop d2 after some time, which I think maybe is the best try. But now a5, and black is just getting a very, very nice and active position. If white plays a3, then the knight just drops back to a6 and finds a very nice square on c5. And this was basically where my prep ended. Like a3, I knew, okay, and knight has to go back to a6, no other square. I'm going to try to play knight c5, try to play for e4 somewhere, and play against white's position. Instead, white castled. So at this point, I'm like on my own. I felt like the position should be very, very good for black. It's like a classic position, opposite sides castling. But black seems much further ahead in terms of the counterplay, and white's setup is, very kind of loose. That said, I did have a hard time figuring out what to do here. I mean, I considered a lot of moves. I think e4 was one of the main moves I considered. But then after bishop takes f4, I wanted to go knight d7, let's say, threatening knight c5, threatening rook takes f4. But then bishop e3, and wasn't quite sure what to make of this position. If knight c5, then white can take, and take on e4. And definitely there's some compensation here for black, but now it's 2 pawns that we sacrifice, so it's quite a bit. So yeah, I wasn't sure about this one. I also considered knight d7 just right away, which I thought looks quite nice. And then I felt like white would have to play knight e4 to try to fight for this square. Then something like this, I wasn't sure how to evaluate it. I checked it after the game. Engine likes black. It says black is clearly better here, with ideas of a4 and again trying to push e4. But yeah, during the game I just wasn't 100% sure if this was the best I could do, because I felt like my position was very good. So I thought maybe I have something better. I also considered this move here, knight a6, just to make sure I'm getting a knight that's coming to c5. And Engine actually likes this quite a bit. But yeah, again, I wasn't confident that this was the best black can do. c6 was another move I considered, which I thought was very logical, just kind of opening things up. Then I thought maybe white goes king to b1 here. And yeah, I considered ideas like takes, knight takes d5, takes, and like bishop e6, and playing against the pin. But it was like bishop c4, and yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to make this all work. If the king was still on c1, then maybe I would go rook c8 here, and then I think the tactics would be working out in black's favor, because we'd have b5 and rook c4 ideas and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, with the king on b1, I wasn't quite sure. And so I ended up just playing queen e7, which is just kind of like a flexible move. It's usually a useful move in this kind of position. I'm supporting e4 here, and just kind of asking white what he wants to do. Yeah, so I think any one of the options actually was probably better. I think the engine says c6 is best here. And then on king b1, it suggests b5, which I can't say didn't cross my mind something like this, but it's hard to pull the trigger sometimes. If you feel like you have a good position, then all of a sudden you're just throwing all your pawns at the opponent's king. It's easy to do in a blitz game, but like in a classical game, sometimes you wonder, like, do you have to sacrifice like 1 or 2 pawns, or is there a way to just kind of like normally get your pieces out and like get a good position? So that's always the struggle of the King's Indian player. But it is quite nice for black. I mean, it's not even clear we're sacrificing anything here. If takes, then we can take on c4 and then take on c6 with the knight, and just looks incredible for black. All the pieces getting active. And if takes on b5, then we're taking on d5, and black center is just insanely strong. So yeah, I don't know. I should have gone for it. I mean, now it just looks very, very obvious. But yeah, during the game, you have several decent options, it seems, and it's often very difficult to choose. But okay, I mean, it definitely kind of instructive moment there. So queen e7, I don't think it spoils too much, but it's a little bit slow. White played rook g1, and now I played c6. White goes a3. I drop back, and queen c2. But now black is a little bit behind compared to before. And after knight c5, white plays bishop g4 here, and actually the situation gets very, very messy. And this was quite a creative idea from the opponent, because he's giving up the bishop, but he wants to open up the h-file and threaten some kind of knight g8 check, knight g6 check, which is very, very unpleasant. I actually should note I considered other ideas here as well. In fact, after fact, instead of c6, also very interesting was this move f3, which I considered. Where if bishop takes f3, there's like knight d3 check, and I can take on f2. And if knight takes f3, I mainly thought about bishop f5 here, forcing something like knight e1. And yeah, actually also thought about it in this position as well, just playing f3 and like takes, bishop f5, knight e1, something like this. Wasn't sure how much black is getting. I definitely like black's position here because white's king is just going to be a sitting duck for the rest of the game, but wasn't totally sure. But Engine actually quite likes this idea, especially in this position after queen e7 to push f3 and go either bishop f5 here and then eventually like c6 or knight d7 or just c6 here. And the idea is that white is never able to play g takes f4, so it's kind of funny. But white has an extra pawn, but the rooks are clearly kind of not very useful. Whereas black is just going to be opening up the c file and the queen side very, very quickly here. So it's a pawn sacrifice, but yeah, it's one that, I don't know, really could have been played. It's clear that black's position is just so much fun, and white is just nowhere near opening anything up on the king side. So c6, basically what happens is I allow my opponent to open up lines, and I'm not quite in time. Now after bishop g4, again, black has a bunch of options here. The main thing I was worried about, let's say if I take here, which I think is the most natural thing to do, is that white's going to take on c8 and play knight f5. I didn't want to allow this, although it's probably not that bad. So queen d7, for example, knight takes g7. I could just allow g takes f4, bring my king back to h8, and play this position where the king is still very, very safe. The rook is doing well on the c file, and I definitely think black would be clearly better here. So in the game, I also thought black is doing well, but somehow wasn't so convinced. Here the engine actually suggests f takes g3, which is kind of insane, but just giving white an extra piece, essentially, but then playing for the initiative. But okay, I didn't consider this at all during the game, and this is just engine tactics, takes, and rook c4 coming. But yeah, otherwise actually it ends up being quite difficult for black. So I end up taking on g4 with the knight to keep the light square bishop, hg, and then king to g8. But this was extremely risky. Now white does have this very funny option here, queen takes h7, which I actually thought my opponent was going to play. And the idea is white gets the queen back, you can take on e7, king f7. But this endgame, I don't know. I mean, black is down a pawn, but I thought there's some annoying counterplay in the position. Engine doesn't really buy it and says white is better. But yeah, during the game, I was thinking this would at least be kind of playable. Yeah, also possible was knight f5, which I thought could be played as well. And then I was going to take gf, and I'm not sure what exactly was going to be my next move here. Maybe just rook c8, or maybe a4, maybe f3, I'm not really sure. During the game, I thought this would be kind of a very messy position, but Engine doesn't like it for black at all, thinks white is close to winning. So this is definitely one I kind of underestimated. So yeah, this knight takes g4 is one of those things where you spend a long time and you don't really like any option, so you just pick one, almost at random. But c takes d5, it's like, I mean, black is never really worse in this position. Queen d7, takes, king king h8. So it's very strange that I didn't just go for this one, because it's a much simpler choice. Anyway, so bishop g4, takes, I go king g8. Now I played b4, which was very surprising. I mean, I think he had some kind of concrete idea in mind after takes. Like in case of knight a6, then the knight is farther. I think his idea was that he wanted to go for the endgame here. And then the knight is kind of worse here in the endgame. Or even, let's say, after knight a6, take on c6, and then take here, and here, and here, and this one is hanging at the end. I'm not really sure, because even here black has bishop b7 and still has a lot of counterplay. So I'm not really sure what the idea was, but yeah, immediately the move felt very strange to me because white is just opening up his own king. And after AB, I also get rook a1 check. Yeah, maybe some knight e4 as well actually was the idea, knight a6 to come here. I don't know. This one is also I'm skeptical of. Is there a BCD and in opening up the c file? But yeah, the real issue is that it's just like opening up the king. So I go rook a1 check because, I mean, most obvious move. And now in king b2, I can trade a pair of rooks, and I get white's rook off of the h file, which I thought was great. So this position I was extremely happy to play. Where, yeah, now I'm just going to develop quickly, get my bishop out, and light square bishop is super strong, and white doesn't have nearly as much play as before. So I don't know, I think my opponent just must have underestimated something here, because he actually started spending time, and he ends up playing knight b1, which feels like, okay, it was not what white wanted when they pushed b4. So now I do have to be precise here, because bishop c3, queen b2 could happen. You know, the rook on a1 is a little bit loose. But I figured I have to play knight a4. Just kind of an awkward move, but very important one to cover these squares. And now I started to feel, yeah, quite good about my position again. So he takes on c6. bc6 was certainly a possibility, but I actually felt like e4 was stronger, so I just played it. And I was lamenting not playing e4 somewhere earlier in the game, so I was like, you know what, here, now's the time. If he takes, okay, then bishop takes b7. At this point, like, my only idea is to just open up the queen side and let the pieces do the work. And I also want to play like e3, for example, which felt like was dangerous. But actually, main idea is also close down this one and not give white any more opportunities for this queen takes h7 trick. So g takes f4. Now I recaptured. And white goes knight f5. I thought, kind of only move, like, what else to do? I gave the bishop, g takes f5. And yeah, it's kind of it's a very tricky position to handle here. I mean, I thought black is doing really well because it feels like my pieces are super active. But at the same time, white does have counterplay kind of baked into the position. He can double rooks on the g file at any point. He has ideas to play like bishop c3 and use the pins. So it really felt like I had to be precise here. But yeah, it was not easy. So I start with queen f6. I think there are other options as well, but mainly I just wanted to control these squares, look for some rook takes b1 ideas or something, trying to make this work. Yeah, did I think about playing rook takes f5? I did, but you know, ultimately I didn't see a ton of upside here. For example, maybe white goes bishop e3 or rook g5, and I didn't exactly see how the bishop is just gonna open up. So after a certain point, I wanted to keep it simple, because you should always consider the exchange sack, but yeah, it doesn't always lead to much. So takes queen f6. White goes king d1. He starts running, which I thought was quite reasonable actually, because otherwise I'm also ready to bring the other rook to the a file, move my knight somewhere, go rook a2, and yeah, I thought the game might be over in just a couple of moves. But he actually ends up defending extremely well. So king d1, d5, king e2, and now his point is that he's just trying to get the king somewhere to where it's actually safer, so that his knight is not just pinned the whole game. Now I took on f5, and I had a little trick in mind with this one that I thought was quite good, but surprisingly doesn't end up leading to much. So queen f5, he goes rook g5, and then my idea is to push d4, where if takes, we get d3 with check, king goes somewhere, we take on c2, And then at the end, white's rook is hanging. He has to kind of trade. I take, but the real point is that the knight is always hanging at the end, and the knight is always pinned at the end as well to this rook on h1. Or, okay, if white were to play king e1, it'd be even worse. So I thought this was a nice trick, but white still has queen b3, and he's very much holding on. I mean, it looks like black's position is like amazing with these pawns, but you know, he's getting rook g1, and he wants c5 check. Actually, and yeah, it's not so easy to do anything to the king. Now I do wish I played d3 check at this point. I thought I could hold on to it. I start with queen e6. If in this other line, if takes and queen d3, then black is taking back, and then the rook is hanging at the end. So black would be rook up here. So queen b3, queen e6, rook g1, rook f7, got to defend the bishop. And now he finds very strong move rook e5. I totally didn't see this. In fact, made me wish I had played king h8 somewhere, but okay, there was no time. Without rook e5, I do think black is doing quite well, because we're going to play d3 somewhere, maybe e3 somewhere. And, you know, white's pieces are still kind of stuck. The white pieces are also a little bit stuck. But rook e5, very strong move, just like hitting the pawn and hitting the queen. I actually don't have a way to keep this one defended. So I throw in d3 check now. And my expectation was he was going to play king either f1 or let's say king e1. And then after like queen d7, rook takes e4. I thought I have actually some really reasonable play here because his knight is pinned and it's quite awkward for white. Maybe rook e7 somewhere. And yeah, actually looks annoying for white. But on d3, he goes king e3, which I again missed. Just totally unexpected. And when he played it, I was like, wow, I can't believe white can do this. But it makes so much sense, of course. I mean, once you see it, it's so obvious. Like he doesn't get himself pinned on the first rank. The king is actually somewhat safe in the center, and he can help collect some of these pawns. If he can start taking these pawns, I mean, I can end up just like 2 pawns down. So yeah, at this point, I'm like trying to reorient myself. I'm trying to figure out if I'm like worse all of a sudden and trying not to lose. We're also approaching time trouble. It's move 35, and we have a couple more moves to make before move 40. I think we have something like, 10 minutes or so. And yeah, it starts to look very bad because if I go queen d7, he takes here, and then he's ready to take this one. I'm just running out of pawns. So I play queen h3 check. He goes rook g3. If king takes e4, I think this is just too dangerous for white's king, so I wasn't worried about this one. So rook g3, he takes the tempo. Queen d7. And now, okay, I just wanted to lure his rook to g3 so that this knight is a little bit under attack. He goes rook takes e4. And finally go king h8. Like, yeah, just so sick of this pin, I really have to get the king off of the g file. Now white goes rook to g1 back to defend this one. I play queen d8 here, because otherwise he wants to take the pawn. Of course, here he can't take because we trade and I take on b1. But after rook g1, I go queen d8. So my idea is queen takes d3 to at least go rook d7. And yeah, I don't know if I actually have enough for the 2 pawns here, but this was the best I could come up with during the game. And I feel like at least it's a little bit annoying. Instead, he goes c5, hitting the rook. And at this point, I realized if I go rook d7, he's going to play queen e6. And I'm like looking at this position, and it's like I have no play. He's turning queen e8 check. Queen takes c6. Like I might just be like losing here. Like what is happening? So I managed to settle down. It's move 39. I really don't have a lot of time left. And I go rook e7. In fact, I should have played rook e7 the move earlier. I think here would have been prudent. Because if queen takes d3, I think there is some trickery here. For example, takes, And yeah, knight b2 check, and then we're winning this one. So kind of some some nice tactics. But yeah, didn't quite notice the strength of this one. Again, time trouble. So rook g1, queen d8. He goes c5, rook e7, king f3, and now we make move 40. I take on e4, king takes e4. Reach this new position where I'm down a pawn, but material is simplified. I'm really not even sure if I'm like worse or better. It's hard to say because I felt like if I can actually just get my rook into the game, because now I feel like my rook is super misplaced on a1. But if I could just get it back, like rook f8, rook a8, rook f8, bring the queen somewhere on the light squares, like seems like I should still be mating this king at some point somehow. But it's really hard, my knight ends up just kind of stranded. So I go queen d4 check, king f3, and I drop back to d7. And yeah, at this point I was trying to figure out what he is going to do here. I really wasn't sure. I was hoping for something like rook to e1. And I was considering this check, king e4, and this sacrifice, knight c5 takes, and rook a8. Playing for this one. I'm not sure if it really works. White has moves like f3 and stuff, and then the idea was to go rook d8. And maybe play for this one or bring the queen, but yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about it on his turn. Then I realized he has another option. He can go rook takes g7. And on king takes, there's bishop c3 check. And white is winning the rook. Takes, queen takes, and rook is going to be hanging. And then on queen takes g7, he can at least take on d3 and eliminate this pawn and threaten like queen d8 check and just create a lot of counterplay. And yeah, he ends up doing this. Rook takes g7. I play queen takes d3. Now I have to be very, very careful not to get myself mated, because the dark square bishop could be super, super strong. So I play h5. I think this was kind of an only move, just creating a square for the king, allowing for some checks for myself in case I need them. And yeah, then we actually end up repeating moves here. Queen d8, king h7, queen d3. And neither side really has a great way to continue. Actually, if anything, I think only white can really continue. Like, he could play queen e4 here, I was thinking, and he has 2 pawns for the exchange. His king is, I think, not really any less safe than my own. And yeah, my rook and knight, actually, especially the knight, is just really kind of poorly placed. Like, it's so hard to move, right, without allowing some bishop c3. So I thought, if anything, white is better here, though. Okay, engine seems to think it's very close to a draw anyway. Yeah, so we end up repeating moves here and agreeing to a draw. Actually, during the game, I wasn't sure how to feel about it, or after the game, because I definitely felt like I was just like losing at some point. In fact, in this position, had my opponent played rook g4, apparently it just has like a huge advantage, because I just don't really have a lot of counterplay, and yeah, he can slowly untangle with like knight c3, bishop e3, knight d2, and then yeah, my king is gonna be in danger one day, because there's always this like g8 square. So yeah, I think I was kind of lucky, because it was clear my opponent was playing for a draw most of the game. In fact, he offered me like 3 draws during the game, at least. He offered me a draw, I think, like move 12 or 13, and then he offered me a draw a little bit later. And then he offered me a draw, I think, once we were repeating. So this one wasn't like a real draw, because here we're just kind of repeating by force anyway. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a little weird. Do I annotate draw offers? I do. I mean, I'm sure I have it on my score sheet, but I usually don't input them. So I don't remember exactly where he offered a draw. But yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know. It was kind of annoying during the game, but at the same time, I'm kind of happy, that he was just so focused on the draw because like he could have won this game. I mean, it's like he had like a very very nice position here at this point. And so yeah, I definitely benefited from from that. I feel. Um, yeah, of course, I had my chances as well, and especially coming out of the opening, I felt like I should have really really decent play like in this position. So yeah, I really didn't feel great about this game in terms of my play. I felt like I very much misplayed things. I had tons of chances to get like a big attack, get big counterplay, but couldn't figure it out over the board.